By 4:42 p.m., the gold and lavender streamers had begun to sag, curling like tired ribbons above the untouched cake. The laughter of other children filled the room, yet my daughter's small face stayed pressed against the glass, eyes scanning the street for headlights that never appeared. My heart beat in a rhythm of denial and hope, each minute a reminder of how long I had waited for something that would not come. For 4 years, I had sent my parents $900 a week so they could live comfortably. That phrase had become the altar I sacrificed peace upon. Today was supposed to prove it mattered, that money could buy love if I just gave enough. But the empty driveway outside told a truth I could no longer excuse. Every balloon shimmered like a question. Where were they? Why did I still expect them to care? The air smelled of sugar and disappointment. Ethan's quiet movements in the kitchen were background noise to the storm in my chest. Gratitude from others meant nothing when the two people I needed had chosen absence. When my phone finally lit up, I answered with trembling hands only to hear my father's voice, sharp and cold. His words carved through me like glass. "We don't count your family." Something inside me broke cleanly, like glass cracking under pressure. I ended the call before he could say another word. The silence afterward wasn't relief, it was revelation. The party music continued, but in my mind, I was already erasing every line that tied me to them. They had drawn their boundary first. Mine would be louder. If you've ever realized love doesn't mean obligation, tell me your turning point below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real family stories that hit where it hurts. Sunday mornings usually meant order, coffee, laundry, Lily's cartoons humming softly in the background. But that morning, silence held the house like a breath too heavy to release. My laptop screen glowed against the dim light, a grid of numbers staring back at me like evidence of my own blindness. 4 years. 208 weeks. Every transfer marked with the same note, "For you and Dad." $900 each time, never late, never questioned. It had started when my father, Nora Alvarez, lost his job at the woodworking plant. He said the union was collapsing, that small towns like Pueblo had no mercy for men in their 50s. My mother, Nora Alvarez, claimed her back pain kept her from standing long hours at the diner. I believed them. I didn't ask for receipts or explanations. I just sent money and told myself I was being a good daughter. Back then, I was new in my position as a project manager. Each promotion came with longer hours and higher taxes, but I wore exhaustion like proof of worth. My salary climbed, so did their requests. Utility bills, car insurance, prescription costs. Then came the extras: property taxes, internet upgrades, even a streaming subscription they swore Lily would love. I paid because guilt is louder than reason. Eventually, the transfers blurred into habit. Their comfort became my measure of stability. I ignored the quiet resentment in Ethan's eyes each time another urgent call came from Pueblo. I told him it wasn't forever, that family helped family. The lie sounded noble enough to live with. But that morning, something shifted. As I scrolled through bank statements, the pattern looked grotesque, like a mirror reflecting a version of me I didn't recognize. I had become their safety net, stretched thin beneath people who never planned to stand on their own. Then I saw the email. "Credit alert, new retail account opened under your SSN." My stomach dropped. I clicked through to find a store card at a chain I'd never visited. The listed address was my parents' home. I wanted to believe it was a clerical error, but denial had already cost too much. Scrolling further, a transaction glared up from the screen: outdoor gear superstore, $1,180. I hadn't bought anything. The timestamp matched the same afternoon Victor had called, claiming he needed gas money to help my cousin move furniture. Haley, the cousin who had lived rent-free with my parents for 3 years, suddenly made sense in this arithmetic of exploitation. The realization settled slowly, like frost creeping across a window. Every excuse, every story, every tear-filled call, each had been part of a cycle that fed on my sense of duty. They didn't need me for survival. They needed me for convenience. I had been the unseen paycheck funding everyone's comfort but my own. I stared at the total, more than $180,000 sent without a single word of gratitude that wasn't rehearsed. I'd built a spreadsheet that could rival a company's budget, and yet the return on investment was emotional bankruptcy. The longer I looked, the more anger sharpened into clarity. I wasn't generous. I was groomed to feel responsible. I had mistaken dependence for affection, obedience for love. I realized, in that still room, that I had been managing 2 jobs, one with deadlines and clients, another disguised as family devotion. My pulse steadied with an unfamiliar calm. Numbers don't lie, and the truth was written in debit and despair. They had taught me to feel guilty for having boundaries. But guilt, I decided, had extracted its last payment. The next time they called, they would find a different version of me, one that no longer paid for affection or silence. Monday morning arrived without ceremony, only the faint gray light that slips through blinds before the world decides to wake. My hands moved before my mind could second-guess them, mechanical, precise, detached. Years of project management had taught me how to build systems, and now I was dismantling one, theirs. The first click was small, an unassuming transfer reversal that sent their balance back into my own account. The number blinked once, confirming the action, and something inside me stilled. For years, I had been their direct deposit of comfort, the silent employee of their comfort. Now I was handing in my resignation. One by one, I opened the tabs that defined my obedience. Utilities, insurance portals, automatic drafts. Each link became a gate I closed behind me. The electric company's interface asked for a reason for transfer. I typed ownership correction. It sounded sterile, harmless, but my chest tightened with each keystroke. The internet provider came next, cancel service. Confirm. The message read, we're sorry to see you go. I wasn't. The words on the screen felt almost human, kinder than the people I was cutting off. Then came the health insurance. My HR portal still listed their names under dependents. I hovered over the removal option longer than I should have, the cursor blinking like a moral test. A single click, and their coverage dissolved into data. The hospital I worked for would ask questions, but explanations were a small price for freedom. Credit cards, store accounts, insurance on the old truck, they all fell, one authorization at a time. Each confirmation email arrived like an obituary for misplaced loyalty. My inbox filled with polite farewells from automated systems that didn't know they were witnessing a rebellion. I froze my credit next. Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. 3 digital locks snapping into place, sealing the breaches I had ignored. My identity had been currency for too long. It was time to repossess myself. By the time I finished, the room smelled of burnt coffee and resolve. My laptop screen reflected my face, calm, almost unfamiliar. This was not rage. This was arithmetic justice. For years, my parents had spoken about love like a transaction. Every favor came with a reminder, every call with a request. I had believed that being needed meant being valued. But need can be a leash. Love without respect is just dependency dressed as virtue. I thought about Haley, always in the background, her presence tolerated because she mirrored their excuses. She was their justification for staying helpless, their proof that comfort could exist without effort. In a way, cutting them off meant cutting her off too. I didn't feel guilty. She had lived too long on the interest of my silence. When the final account was closed, I stared at the spreadsheet that had once given me pride. Now it looked like an artifact of servitude, a museum of every time I'd chosen guilt over boundaries. I deleted it. Watching the document vanish felt cleaner than forgiveness. The house was quiet. Outside, the world went on exactly as before. Birds still crossed the sky. Cars still moved. Nothing shattered except the illusion that my absence would destroy them. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about whether my parents were okay. They were adults with choices, the same way I had been when I learned to survive without them. My only mistake had been assuming responsibility for their refusal to grow. The clock on the wall ticked toward noon. Somewhere in Pueblo, my parents' lights might already be flickering, their internet buffering into silence. The thought didn't bring satisfaction, only closure. Revenge didn't always roar. Sometimes it just clicked. They had built comfort from my exhaustion. Today, I repossessed both. It didn't take long for silence to erupt into chaos. By the second day, my phone had become a siren, ringing, buzzing, vibrating across every surface of my home. The first wave came from Linda, her number flashing in intervals like an alarm I refused to hear. Then Victor, then Haley. One by one, their names appeared like ghosts demanding rent. The voicemails stacked up faster than I could delete them. Each one shifted tone, a performance in escalation, confusion to anger, pleading to accusation. I didn't listen long enough to finish any of them. I had learned that guilt has perfect pitch. It always finds a way to sound familiar. Emails followed next. The subject lines were desperate. Emergency. Answer me. What's wrong with you? Then came the relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly fluent in moral outrage. My mother had always known how to weaponize perception. Now she was orchestrating a campaign, a family-wide emergency broadcast, declaring that her daughter had turned cruel. Neighbors from Pueblo texted me too. vague messages about concerned parents and misunderstandings. I imagined Linda sitting at her kitchen table, painting herself as the fragile matriarch abandoned by her ungrateful child. It was almost artistic, the way she could twist truth into sympathy. What none of them knew was that I had been preparing for this backlash long before it came. Every receipt, every transaction, every transfer archived in a drive labeled Evidence of Love. That folder was my shield now, not out of spite but out of self-defense. By the third day, Victor's voice appeared through an unknown number. I didn't answer. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument could. But then another text arrived from a cousin I barely remembered telling me my father's stress levels were dangerous. It was the same script, the same manipulation, recycled for new actors. I didn't reply. Empathy had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Then came the public shaming. A post appeared on Linda's social media, an image of her and Victor looking solemn, captioned with a plea for prayers in difficult times. The comments section filled quickly. So sorry, Linda. You raised such a hard-working daughter. Hope she comes to her senses. I scrolled through it without anger, only detachment. I knew every name on that list had once benefited from my parents' exaggerated generosity, the same generosity funded by my exhaustion. What used to hurt now felt distant, like a movie playing on mute. They had their narrative, and I had mine documented, dated, factual. They were performing grief. I was living recovery. That evening, Ethan found me sitting on the porch, the twilight stretching long shadows across the yard. I didn't speak, but he didn't need me to. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was acknowledgement, the kind that said, "You finally stopped running after people who never chased you back." As night fell, I reviewed the messages one last time before blocking every contact. My family had turned into a mob united not by love but by the threat of losing control. Their panic wasn't about losing me, it was about losing access. Inside the house, Lily's laughter carried down the hallway, pure, unburdened. That sound anchored me to reality. I wasn't the villain in their story. I was the author of my own ending. The next morning, I received a formal envelope in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakable. Victor's, all sharp angles and pride. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. "We'll make you regret this." No signature, no warmth, just a threat wrapped in nostalgia. I folded it neatly and slid it into the same folder where the bank statements lived. Not for vengeance, but for proof. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to wait. Let them talk. Let them perform. I had nothing left to explain. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, thick and deliberate, its weight heavier than paper should allow. The return address belonged to a law office in Pueblo I'd never heard of. The sight of it sent a pulse of something cold through my ribs. I didn't need to open it to know it was their next move. Inside, the letter was printed on heavy ivory stock, the kind people use when they want intimidation to feel expensive. The first line confirmed my suspicion. Notice of intent to pursue legal action for financial misrepresentation. The words blurred, then sharpened again. My parents were suing me. The accusation was absurd. Unlawful withdrawal of promised financial support. They claimed I had agreed to provide indefinite assistance and had suddenly and maliciously withdrawn it, causing them emotional and material distress. It was surreal reading my own name beside phrases like breach of verbal contract and intentional infliction of hardship. For a moment I just sat there, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. It wasn't anger. I felt it was disbelief turned heavy, like realizing a wound you thought was shallow had been festering all along. I called my office, requested a personal day, and drove to the nearest attorney's office I could find. Her name was Patricia Chen, a woman whose calm professionalism made the fluorescent lights feel less harsh. She read the letter quietly, flipping pages without expression. When she finally looked up, her words were steady. "They don't have a case," she said. "There's no enforceable contract, written or otherwise. Family support is considered voluntary unless tied to a formal agreement. This is intimidation, not litigation." I nodded, but my stomach didn't unclench. The thought that my parents had paid a lawyer had sat across from someone, telling their side of a story they invented was what gutted me. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about punishment. Patricia drafted a response letter that afternoon measured, factual, emotionless. "Our client denies any contractual obligation," it read. "Cease and desist further harassment or unfounded legal threats." I signed it with a hand that didn't shake until after the pen left the page. Driving home, I passed the familiar markers of everyday life: gas stations, school zones, the coffee shop where Ethan and I met after night shifts. The world looked unchanged, but everything inside me had rearranged itself. I wasn't the dutiful daughter anymore. I was the defendant in my parents' delusion. That night, I placed their legal letter in a drawer with the others: the threats, the folded notes, the unreturned calls, proof of a transformation that could never be undone. Weeks passed before I heard anything else. No court summons came. No follow-up notices. Just silence, the kind that feels earned, not empty. The storm had spent itself out, and what remained was the wreckage of their credibility. Word had spread in the family circle, but not the way Linda intended. People had seen the lawsuit for what it was: desperation turned public. A friend from Pueblo messaged me quietly, saying my parents were now struggling to pay property taxes, that Victor had tried to sell some tools but couldn't find buyers. It wasn't revenge, it was the arithmetic of choices coming due. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt resolved. Justice doesn't always need applause. Sometimes it's just the quiet realization that no one is calling anymore. In the evenings, I began taking walks with Lily through our neighborhood, her small hand warm in mine. She pointed out every house with Halloween decorations, her laughter chasing away the echo of court jargon still lodged in my memory. Each step felt like reclaiming ground I hadn't realized I'd lost. The past had become a legal document, signed, sealed, closed. The quiet came first, not as absence but as correction. Days passed where the phone stayed still, the inbox remained empty, and my thoughts stopped bracing for impact. It was strange how peace could feel both unfamiliar and deserved. I had built my life around noise calls, demands, guilt disguised as concern. Now, the silence hummed like a song I hadn't known I'd missed. Mornings became slower. I learned the rhythm of coffee without anxiety, of sunlight creeping across the kitchen tiles without the shadow of obligation following behind it. Lily laughed louder these days, her joy unburdened by the tension she used to sense but couldn't name. Ethan smiled more too, not the cautious kind, but the real one, the one that comes when peace finally feels permanent. At work, I noticed how differently I carried myself. There was no weight on my chest when I opened my emails, no fear that another urgent message from my parents would collapse the day. I had room for things that once felt luxurious: small talk, lunch breaks, quiet drives home with music instead of silence. Freedom had a texture now, light but solid, like clean air after rain. Sometimes, I wondered what they were doing in Pueblo. Whether the lawsuit had drained their savings, whether the house felt emptier without my money keeping the lights steady. The thought didn't sting anymore, it just existed like weather, distant and predictable. I no longer checked their social media, no longer asked distant relatives for updates. Detachment wasn't cruelty. It was survival perfected. Therapy helped. Dr. Patel, my counselor, once told me that breaking generational cycles isn't loud, it's quiet, methodical, and deeply uncomfortable. I had expected liberation to feel cinematic, but instead it felt like maintenance. Each boundary was a small repair to something long cracked. Ethan called it the soft revenge. Not in anger, but in recognition. I didn't need to prove anything to them. Every bill I paid for my own family, every bedtime story, every meal cooked without dread, these were my rebuttals. Each act of normalcy was evidence that peace was possible without permission. One evening, while sorting through old files on my computer, I found the folder again, the one labeled Evidence of Love. For a moment, I hovered over it. I could have deleted it, but I didn't. Not because I needed the proof, but because it reminded me of who I'd been: the woman who thought endurance was love and silence was respect. That woman deserved to be remembered, not erased. Months passed. The seasons shifted. Lily started third grade, proudly wearing the same backpack I'd patched twice instead of replaced. She didn't need perfect things. She needed present ones. I understood that now. On a Saturday morning, I took her to the park. While she ran toward the swings, the wind picked up, scattering golden leaves in soft spirals. I realized standing there that revenge had never been about punishment. It was about reclamation, the quiet courage to stop letting pain dictate the terms of your love. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked if Grandma and Grandpa were still mad. The question didn't twist my stomach like it once did. Maybe, I said softly. But that's their story to carry, not ours. After she fell asleep, I sat by the window, watching the sky fade from amber to blue-black. Somewhere out there, my parents existed unchanged, maybe even unrepentant. But they no longer existed inside me, and that was enough. The silence around me wasn't empty anymore. It was justice breathing quietly, finally on my side. Autumn returned, softer this time. The mornings carried that crisp stillness that only comes when the world has exhaled after chaos. I watched the leaves scatter across our yard like unspoken apologies from the universe, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to sweep them away. Some messes, I had learned, were beautiful when left alone. Lily's laughter drifted through the window as she and Ethan carved pumpkins on the porch. The small knife in her hand trembled with effort, her brow furrowed in focus. I smiled, realizing that this moment of ordinary life was the justice I had been chasing all along. The storm had passed months ago. No more calls, no more letters. The silence had matured into permanence. And within that silence, I found a version of myself I didn't know existed, a woman who didn't flinch when the phone rang, who didn't equate worth with sacrifice, who could say no and still sleep peacefully. Healing wasn't a sunrise, it was a series of quiet mornings like this. I had expected closure to arrive dramatically, with apologies or revelations. But instead, it came disguised as peace, steady, deliberate, and mine alone. There were still traces of them in me. My mother's perfectionism in how I folded laundry, my father's caution when crossing streets. Their ghosts lived in the small details of my days, not haunting, just existing proof that I came from them, but I no longer belonged to their patterns. Sometimes, when I drove past certain places, a diner off Highway 47, an old thrift store where my mother once bought me a second-hand winter coat, I felt a flicker of memory, but not pain. I didn't need to forgive them to move on. I just needed to accept that love, in their language, was always conditional, and I had chosen to stop translating it. Ethan often said I seemed lighter now, though I hadn't changed much outwardly. Maybe peace doesn't alter your face, it changes your gravity. The house felt different too. We painted the walls pale blue, replaced the old curtains with ones that let the morning light pour in. It wasn't renovation, it was reclamation. I started volunteering at a local women's center on weekends. I met others like me, people who had given too much to families that only took. Their stories echoed mine. Quiet endurance mistaken for loyalty, guilt dressed as duty. Listening to them reminded me that survival is not the opposite of love, it's what love should protect. One afternoon, a woman about my mother's age hugged me after a group session. Her voice cracked when she said, "You make me believe it's not too late to start over." That sentence lingered long after she left. Maybe that was the point of everything, to live in a way that made someone else's healing seem possible. At night, after Lily had gone to bed, I often wrote in my journal. Not about anger or grief anymore, but about gratitude for boundaries, for second chances, for the strength that came from finally choosing myself. I didn't write about revenge either. That word had lost its sharpness. My revenge had already taken form, a life that thrived without their permission. Sometimes peace feels like surrender. Other times it feels like winning quietly. For me, it felt like both. I still think about them sometimes, but the thoughts no longer arrive with bitterness. If I could send them one message, it would be this: you raised me to survive, and I did. Just not in the way you wanted. The past didn't vanish, it simply stopped ruling me. And that, I realized, was the truest form of freedom. Outside, the porch light flickered on as the last of the daylight slipped away. Ethan laughed at something Lily said, and I felt it again, that deep, calm certainty that I had made the right choice. I had chosen peace, and peace had chosen me back. Power doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers. If this story made you feel something, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories about finding strength in silence and reclaiming your life on your own terms.